Hey there, fellows. My name is Thomas, and our project on artificial reefs. I'll guide you through this adventure. But what are artificial reefs, and where do they originate from?
An artificial reef is a human-made underwater structure typically built to promote marine life in areas with a generally featureless bottom. It can control erosion or improve surfing as well. Many reefs are built using objects that were built for other purposes, for example by sinking oil rigs, scuttling ships, or by deploying rubble or construction debris. Other artificial reefs are purpose-built, example, PVC or concrete. Shipwrecks may become artificial reefs when preserved on the seafloor. Regardless of construction method, artificial reefs generally provide hard surfaces where algae and invertebrates such as barnacles, corals, and oysters attach. The accumulation of attached marine life in turn provides intricate structure and food for fish. Artificial reefs have been used to increase fish yields, or for agriculture have been used at least since the 17th century in Japan, when rubble and rocks were used to grow kelp, while the earliest recorded construction of an artificial reef in the United States is from the 1830s, when logs from huts were used off the coast of South Carolina to improve fishing. More recently, castaway junk, such as old refrigerators, shopping carts, ditched cars, out-of-service vending machines replaced the logs in reefs. Officially sanctioned projects have incorporated decommissioned subway cars, vintage battle tanks, armored personnel carriers, and oil drilling rigs.
Believe it or not, there are problems that come with artificial reefing.
In the 1970s, over 2 million tires were dumped off the coast of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Unfortunately, these tires were not securely fastened to the ocean floor, and they drifted up to the surface and polluted many of normal reefs around the area and caused fish to die.
And as of 2009, only 100,000 were retrieved, leaving over millions still in the area.
But what are the costs of artificial reefs, and what are some future projects?
The cost of artificial reefs can jump up into the millions. For example, the city of Naples plans on making 36 football field-sized artificial reefs, which will increase the cost by even more millions.
And to better understand artificial reefs, we spoke to an expert and asked him some questions.
How do artificial reefs affect the geography of the seafloor?
Okay, so when you put down a reef, it's really important to make sure you have appropriate materials, because if it's a lot of times what happens is when the reefs sit in the sand, it can actually cause scouring. And depending on what type of hard bottom you have there, they can either sink, they can break apart, or they certainly, or because of their presence, they can actually direct currents and not on a very small scale affect the current and maybe affect a nearby area.
Are there any detrimental effects these have on the ocean?
Yeah, so for the longest time, artificial reefs are not new. I mean, for one way or another, they've been used for hundreds of years, and unfortunately, in the past, it was just kind of a dump what you've got. So everything from old cars to refrigerators. So if you're not using proper materials and they're not, if you drop them on areas that are not, that already have bottom habitat, they can actually cause a lot of damage. So there's a lot of rules now in terms of what you can use and where they can go.
What materials are typically used to create the most efficient reefs?
Okay, so these days there's a lot of strict regulations regarding what can be used, but clean concrete, there's prefabricated modules, boat hulls, but if boats or ships are going to be used, they have to do a lot of environmental work to remove any types of asbestos or any type of other potential hazards. So again, the days of just being able to dump whatever you want out there is no longer allowed. In fact, it has to not only be environmentally benign, but it also has to be stable, so that if a hurricane comes through, it's not just going to move on shore.
Have you ever created an artificial reef?
Yeah, so I'm fortunate. One of the things I get to do is work with Collier County's Artificial Reef Program, and it's a long, drawn-out process to actually create a reef. One of the first things you have to do is survey the area to make sure it would be suitable and that there's not already bottom habitat. But yeah, I've actually had a chance to work with Collier County in going through the whole process of getting regulations, and it always feels good when you actually get something on the bottom, because there's a lot of work that goes into it.
What are some of the laws that regulate the creation?
There are a lot of rules. It used to be that anybody could go out and get a permit to jump a reef, but these days it's limited to local governments and research institutions. But one of the first things, they have to be permitted, and they are permitted through the Army Corps of Engineers as well as the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. So you actually have to get permits to get a reef. You have to go do bottom surveys to make sure that the area is suitable to have it. Whatever types of reef material you're using, it has to be inspected to make sure that there's not going to have A, any types of potential hazards or chemicals in it, and B, that it's stable so that normal conditions or even large storms won't displace it. And then once a reef is put in, basically they have to even go and double check the area to make sure there aren't things like sea turtles or other potentially threatened species out in the area. And usually after a reef is done, there's some type of monitoring that's required too to make sure that the objectives of what you wanted are being met.
Well, that's our film on artificial reefs. I hope you enjoyed this experience and learned a lot, and explored the problems that come with artificial reefs.
And we showed you guys the cost factors and the future problems.
I hope you enjoyed this film, and